Hello and welcome to this episode of Timeless Topics. This is part 2 in a 2-part series on microdosing self-care. In this episode, we're going to discuss everything from moral fatigue to trauma stewardship to toxic work environments. We're so excited you're back with us. Let's go ahead and jump into the conversation.
Other thing that kind of gave me thought was this concept of moral fatigue, because I don't know that I've really heard that before, and I like that term. And I think, again, as an aside, that could be a really interesting manuscript
Mhm.
about the implications of moral fatigue on not just our patient outcomes, but recruitment and
Right.
retention, right? Because if we are having that and we are losing our filters, and it's like, yes, physical fatigue, mental fatigue, moral fatigue, all of that adding in, I am not at my best. Someone is sitting back watching me. Why would they ever want to go into this field?
Yeah.
As Jessi said, I am not demonstrating to them that they can come to me, that they can be safe with me. Why would I ever subject myself to that? Because this field is making you a not nice person, right? Like I say to people all the time, and it's these conversations are actually making me stop and think about things that I say that I think are jokes, but I'm like, because tell people after midnight, I'm not at my best. I'm like a gremlin. Now, if you feed me cake, I'm usually okay, but if I don't have cake, I'm not okay. And is that really the persona that I want to be demonstrating, right? Again, I think it's a joke, but someone who doesn't know me doesn't recognize that that is me attempting to be funny. They're just like, oh, I don't want to talk to that person after midnight.
Yeah.
And am I showing future nurses and nurse practitioners? This is really a field you want to go into. I do love what I do. I love the families. I love the babies. And I want you to go into this. I'm not demonstrating that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that is it's a sobering thought.
You're making me think of, I love this conversation. So there's this chick, her name is Laura Vandernoot Lipsky, and she talks about trauma stewardship. And sometimes those behaviors, Tracey, that you shared, kind of when you get a little bit short, maybe, or sometimes we get a little cynical, or we make jokes, or we get angry. There's a whole like ring that she describes as trauma exposure responses. So some of these behaviors are actually a consequence from our own trauma that we're experiencing, whether it's bearing witness or the trauma that is unfolding in our bodies and our psyche as a consequence, maybe of sleep deprivation, of seeing these terrible things, of being hungry, all of the things. But we are cultured to kind of stuff that down. And what happens is it squirts out, right, in these crazy ways that we think we might be modifying, by maybe making it a joke, but you were saying, you're reflecting back on it, you're going, oh, maybe that's not exactly what I want, but it becomes this microculture, right, or this subculture. And the other thing I made a note to make a comment about too, though, kind of recognizing that we're in these systems. Yes, I think we have a profound opportunity and responsibility to begin to redefine and reshape what these environments look like for us so that we can show up as our better selves in service to others without sacrificing ourselves, or maybe sacrificing ourselves less. You mentioned this kind of at the beginning of the conversation, and I was like, ooh, I kind of like that, when you said, I'm going to go out, I need to see the sun, I need to get some fresh air, and maybe kind of normalizing this micro dosing of self-care throughout these long shifts or throughout these turbulent situations that maybe something really bad has happened. We've managed the situation, but it doesn't mean that there isn't any fallout, because I remember acute situations where you know you stabilize the patient, but there's a residue that's left on you that feels really heavy, feels maybe scary, all the things. And what I would do is, oh, shove that down. I've got a little more space over here, stuff that down instead of maybe saying, okay, let's do a debrief. And you know what? I'm going to go get a cup of tea and walk around the campus for, a few minutes, or, tag your it while I go and microdose, because I just need to do that instead of, keep stuffing it down, because at some point Vesuvius is going to erupt and it ain't going to be pretty for anybody. But, I think what this conversation is kind of highlighting is there's so many layers to this. This isn't just like, oh, this is what self-care looks like and just do it, every 3 hours, or, 3 times a day, or whatever your schedule is. It's way bigger than that. And there's lots of other moving parts that are maybe adding to the distress and requiring more self-care. But maybe there are some avenues too that can help you kind of let off some of the steam. Someone mentioned this earlier about the community that we also work within, that it isn't about us just sucking this up in our silos, but maybe really decompressing in community on shift, while we're there for each other.
Well, I like that. I was going to say, I'm sorry, I like that concept of microdosing, right? Because that's usually people's response. There's no time,
Yes.
right? I don't have time to debrief or decompress or whatever. But even if, like you say, it's even just 5 minutes,
Yeah.
right? Like there's rare occasion where you can't just give me 5 minutes,
Yeah.
right? To just breathe, right? And I totally feel you, like you run this whole scenario, and at the end of it, there are 6 people lined up because they've been waiting to call you because they knew that you were in the scenario. So you don't even get a second to say, wow, that was intense. I mean, I remember situations where my heart rate is elevated and I still got the shakes from the adrenaline running, right? But it's like, okay, let me turn to the next person and I am still up
Right.
here. But it's like, can I take a second to just come down? And then I can think clearly.
Yeah.
Because what happens is when I'm still up here and you come at me with something that I perceive to be minor, but to you, it is major because that is your patient or the family is stressing you, my response is not what it should be
Yeah.
because I'm still up here. And I'm like, how dare you come at me with something like that when baby over there dying, like
Yeah.
dying, right? And that's not the appropriate response.
Yeah. It makes me, that might be a topic for a future episode, right? Like this, the ability to regulate, right, in those moments, and what are things that we can make accessible to healthcare professionals, regardless of role, to regulate, right? Usually when I teach in RP, I talk to people and I say, yes, we're all here to save the baby. That's why we're here. That's what we're going to learn how to do. It's always bagging, okay? Like you got to bag them, right? But we're going to get to this point of like, but bagging is scary though, right? You pick up that bag, you cognitively are aware that like, uh-oh, we're not in a good place, but you need to regulate your emotional response so that you don't make a poor cognitive decision. So I usually will tell people when you walk up to the apneic baby who now has met clinical criteria to need to be bagged, I want you to take a deep breath before you put the bag on their face. Get the bag out, take a deep breath. That 1 or 3 seconds is not going to change your clinical outcome in a negative way, but it could, if you don't take it, it could impact negative. Because if you can't center yourself before you react in an emergent way, you're more likely to make a mistake and cause harm. So, and to your point, if you've got a line of people lining up to you, you just finished a 30-minute code that may or may not have been successful, and you're like, I just need a drink of water and to sit down for a second. And they're like, hey, but baby so-and-so wants to go home, and so-and-so didn't finish his feed, and mom's got a question about this. Those are all valid, necessary things that absolutely deserve your time, but they can't happen right now, you
Right.
know? And so being able to speak up and say, I hear you, I see you, I'm here for you, we're going to do that, but I need like a minute and a half. And literally, do I need to set a timer? Can I objectively pass time to say that I need a bubble of X number of minutes that allows me to come back into my zone to be able to react in a way that is going to help everyone and not just give you a from the hip kind of response that could cause harm, even though harm was not intended.
Yeah. But that's a culture shift too, right? Because we're like
Absolutely.
this, I mean, the groove in a NICU is fast, 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 quick, quick,
Mhm.
quick, and you said shoot from the hip, and and we, I mean, I think I don't want to throw anyone under the bus. We tend to pride ourselves on that, right? I mean, that's
Absolutely.
another one of those little feathers in your cap. Um, and so we need to kind of shift. What behaviors are we rewarding? Not that I want to like be wagging my finger at anybody, but I think we need to shift the culture in a loving, respectful way that brings us back to that place of honoring, what's happening in this moment. And we're going to now take a moment. We're going to just do this. And there's no harm, no foul. We should honor the importance of debriefs because otherwise, where is all that going? That's getting shoved right down in here, and it's going to come out in a really ugly way at some undisclosed moment when it won't serve anybody. So, but it's right, it's recognizing it. You guys both said this, you use the word self-awareness, which I love, curiosity. What could this look like that might feel less toxic, less overwhelming? I know I'm in an ICU. I know that. But I think that there are levels of stress and distress that can be managed in this place so that I can show up more grounded and more prepared to address the situations. Just because, one situation is falling apart as it seems doesn't mean that that has to be the description of the entire milieu. But that, I think, is a journey, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. It just makes me think of like how do we decrease the allostatic load for everybody, right? Like when have we tipped the scales that now this stress is no longer pushing me to be my best, it's actually causing harm and allowing me to show up in a less than way than I'm capable of, which then feeds into the cultural part of it of then my perception from my team or my peers or my coworkers is that I'm this person, even though that might not be true,
Right.
right? But you then it begets all of the gossiping and all the other things that we end up doing in order to survive stress, right? I
Yeah.
always think about it when I'm trying to get my new grads to kind of wrap their mind around this. I always talk about like, when you're really stressed out, maybe you're going through a breakup or something, you want somebody to show up at your door with cupcakes and pizza. If they showed up at your door with hummus and carrots, you'd be like, why are you here? I don't want that. Even though cognitively, hummus and carrots would be the more healthy decision, but you kind of need an emotional need met first, that we sometimes can get from those things. So sometimes we slide into some coping mechanisms, lateral violence, gossiping, all of those kinds of behaviors because it allows us to get through stress. But really, the answer isn't to get through, the answer is to dismantle, right? Like, how can we take this apart to make this more achievable for everybody to function in a more respectable way from a self-respect way.
So wouldn't that be a novel idea? Because I hear a lot of my colleagues talk about toxic work environments, right? That seems to be the word, which is exactly what you were describing, Jessi, right? But the word that people is the toxic environment. Wouldn't it be a novel idea if a simple strategy to kind of change that culture would be to implement intentional microdosing for self-care,
Yeah.
Yeah.
self-awareness, right? And that we develop this model where at certain points of the day, doesn't necessarily have to be after something traumatic or major happens, but
Yeah.
certain points during the day, you intentionally take 90 seconds. It's the idea of setting a timer and just saying 90 seconds, we're gonna whatever. I used to work with an attending who in the middle of round, she would be like, okay, yoga break. And she would send everybody through these yoga poses. And the first time I looked at her, like, what in the world is wrong with you? Right? But it just gave people a second to say, breathe,
Yeah.
right? And then she's like, okay, back to rounds. And we would jump back in. And it was just like, wow. But what if it was something truly intentional and over time? I know nothing's going to change immediately, just like a lot of these settings did not become toxic immediately. It
Yeah.
was built over time. It's not going to change immediately, but over time. would that help dispel some of this concept of it being toxic and stressful? And that has to help with retention.
Yes.
And I would imagine it's going to help with recruitment because if you know that this is a place where people want to stay, then I want to join that team. If
Yeah.
it's a team where people are leaving after 1 and 2 years, I don't want to be a part of that team. Something is wrong there,
Yeah.
right? And so as we talk workforce issues as a whole, there has to be other creative strategies that we implement into place.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the knee-jerk thing is just throw money at the problem, right? But if money was going to fix it, it would have fixed it already. You think, you see like $30,000 sign-on bonus. You're like, oh, what's going on there? Like, there's a reason why we got to pay people 30 grand to come here. And so, like, well, one, I do believe we should be compensated, but that can't be the only thing.
No.
There's got to be something else in it, and really people are willing to stay in maybe resource from a compensation standpoint, lesser environments if the culture is good.
Yeah.
If I feel valued, if I feel respected, if my team is someone who I feel supported by, who I feel like I'm actually a member of a team, regardless of the individual team members, right? So, because sometimes it's just walking in and being like, I might not be your friend. We might not go out and, party on the weekends or something, but I know I could code with you and I would have a good, safe outcome, right? I don't have to be, necessarily fond of you to still know that we can function from a place that recognizes everybody's abilities and values everybody's abilities.
Right.
And that's that culture shift that I feel like we've got to get a handle on because in some, roles and in some pockets, whether it's units or pockets of the country, it's kind of killing the profession a little bit. And then it's making it scary to be someone who is then receiving healthcare because the patients pick up on this and they kind of read the room, right? And one day we're all going to be patients and we're going to be reading the room and be like, oh no, we should have done something about this because now everything feels so disjointed.
Yeah. You made me think of that idea of adaptation. But over time, adaptation can become maladaptive, right? I'm adapting to a toxic environment, maybe, or I'm adapting to the fact that Tracy's not so great after midnight unless I show up with cake. I'm adapting to that, but over time, that may be maladaptive, right? Because I'm also reinforcing that behavior, right, in ways that, and you need something besides cake. Cake is awesome, but you need something else. And so I like, it's amazing what you can kind of uncover and self-discover when you have these conversations. Because I think that whoever that doc was or whoever that clinician was that was doing a little yoga break in rounds, it just takes one person, right? I mean, and we all know it's going to be slow going, but if we can maintain some level of momentum around that thing, because your face lit up when you shared that. So even though you were like, this is weird, but I'm kind of digging it, this is kind of cool. How can we do more of that then? How can we replicate that? But also to the larger point, then how can we embed those types of phenomena into the culture of care that can begin to shift the tide? Because the other piece of it is it can't just rely on, well, this unit got blessed with this super yogi
Right.
doc and everybody else is going to hell in a handbasket because they don't have a yogi doc in their group. And I also, just to kind of circle back, I like that you made that mention about the stick and the carrot, and but also, we have what do we call these groups? Like employee assistance. We have, the chaplain services. We have all these things outside, but it's not changing the inside, right? It's not changing the culture. How do we either get rid of those things, or how do we help those resources that are there? I mean, there was some good intention, I think, and good thoughts around some of these resources, but it feels like maybe we've built some seriously hard, thick walls that these loving souls, that want to do good, just can't seem to penetrate. So there's kind of a missing piece almost of balancing it out. And so, yeah, I just wanted to make a comment about those observations of the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, I feel like all of these kind of toxic cultures and things like that, they come from a trauma responsive place, right? Where they're saying, well, no one's meeting my needs, so I just won't have them, and like you're just kind of like at this big wall that you're putting up that then when someone tries to help, you just feel kind of going back to the Medal of Honor kind of thing, like this pride that you don't need anybody. But we all need somebody. Like that's just the nature of humans, right? Like we're not meant to be isolated, lone wolf kind of things. We thrive in community. So we can thrive in community in a good way, or we can thrive in community in a bad way, which are toxic cultures that are developing in some places, right? Or we can have that evidence to the contrary, if you will, of, well, if you could have a toxic culture, then you can have the opposite of a toxic culture, right? You can have a belonging culture or an acceptance culture or a wellness culture. I feel like wellness is starting to be kind of, the word is kind of being co-opted a little bit into thinking that the only person that can make you well is you. And so I'm just going to tell you to go meditate or get a pedicure or whatever, and then it's on you if you do it or not. But really, wellness is a community-based concept. We have to have look out for each other, right? And I think sometimes that's what we don't have access to in the systems that we function in because the demand is so high. There's so much tech demand. There's so much demand for all these different tasks that we lose sight of the humanity of what we do. But when we're able to tap into, the human in me sees the human in you kind of thing, then it's able to say like, oh, well, yeah, maybe there is a different way that we can navigate this and something else that we can work to try to make those micro adjustments to systems and to cultures. Because we know things like yoga breaks and movement breaks, there's a reason why recess is in elementary school. We know that like you need to have physical expression of things from time to time and a cognitive break. But in healthcare, we don't ever facilitate that. And that's something that I think we got to work on.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Timeless Topics. We welcome your feedback and suggestions, so please reach out. Our handle on all social media platforms is @TimelessTopicsNICU, and our email address is timelesstopicsnicu@gmail.com. See you next time.